So I imagine everyone here knows of Waverley Abbey, that wonderful house in Farnham, in the grounds, or rather, I suppose the ruins in the grounds of the house, or the house are in the grounds of the ruins. Long ago, it's been the vision of Selwyn Hughes, and most of us knew of it in the old days of places where you could go to do counselling courses. And then more recently, they've widened it out to do many, many more courses, retreats, and all sorts of good things to encourage us all in walking with the Lord and in sharing his word. Only last week, I was there with my son and my daughter-in-law, and we had coffee there. So here's a little plug for Waverley Abbey, because they are opening to the public now to have coffee there, and go and have coffee and wander around the lovely grounds. And so we did. We wandered through the bereavement trail, the beautiful bereavement trail that's been set up. And we wandered over the bridge down towards the ruins and pondered on the monks who were praying there so many years ago. And just thought how Selwyn Hughes, if he knew what's happening now, maybe he does, would be just so thrilled. So now, as you probably mostly know, it's combined with 24/7 prayer, which is Pete Greig and his team. And looking in the website very briefly, I see that Pete Greig says, "This now is about the future, a new abbey for a new generation." And I saw also, to my interest in the website, that one of their strap lines is encounter. And it is encounter God and be transformed so you can change the world. And I think we could take that for our strap line. So Jason is the new principal of the Waverley Abbey College, and he is very kindly going to come and tell us their exciting, and it is very exciting, new vision.
Thank you. Are you going to ask me some questions, Viv?
I was going to ask.
You were.
You see, I'm so nervous about this live streaming, that's the thing. Well done for remembering. So the questions are, yes, just tell us a bit about yourself. Are you a family man?
Yeah, I am actually.
And what makes you tick?
What makes me tick? Hello. Lovely to be here. I'm a family man. Moved to the area very recently, lived in South London for a long time, from Luton originally. Married for 30-something years, don't tell my wife, I can't remember. 3 grown-up children, and I should have become a grandfather last weekend, but we're just waiting. So, waiting on a phone call. What makes me tick? Well, I've got 2 doctorates, which is a bit boring, but I love books. Always have loved books. I've got about 5,000. I had to get rid of about 1,000 when we moved. That's not a lot for people that collect books, by the way. So, always got a book to hand or on me. So books, yeah, that's one of my favourite things.
Okay, great. And this is my favourite question to ask people. How did you become a Christian?
Yeah, I'd never been to church until I was almost 17. My father worked in the Middle East and abandoned our family. My mother had a breakdown. I had a 1-year-old brother and a 15-year-old brother. And then one of my aunts in the family that the rest of my family didn't like because she was a Christian. And basically, she didn't swear, she didn't smoke, she didn't drink, so everybody thought she had ideas above her station. But anyway, she reached out to her best friend, who was a church secretary. And my mother took a phone call, and she was invited to a Baptist church. And I thought, life is bad enough as it is without Christians making it worse. So I went to church to look after my mother, and I went to a school hall, which was an unusual place for church, and people were warm and friendly and welcoming, and as they were worshipping, I remember thinking, like it was yesterday, these people actually believe what they're singing about. Went back to the evening service, felt drawn back. No, that was the presence of God now. The service had finished. And I know now I was just experiencing the presence of God. I just didn't know what it was. So the youth pastor came and sat down with me And he said, do you know what a Christian is? I said, no. He tried to find a journey into life, but couldn't find one. Little booklet. And he said, I'll have to explain it in my own words. I hope that's okay. And it was. And this is how he presented Christianity to me. He said, if you become a Christian, your life may be harder, not easier. And I'm so glad he told me that. I remember thinking, you have no idea what my life is like at the minute. He said, but if you do, you will have meaning, adventure, and purpose, something to live for and something to die for every day of your life. Do you want to go away and think about this? I was like, no, I will swap my life now for that. And then we prayed a prayer, and I gave my life to Jesus. I'd read the Chronicles of Narnia, you know, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. I was so into books, and they were also an escape from domestic violence and other things. For some reason, and I think it was the Lord, I read all 7 of them 7 times. So even though I'd never been to a church, once someone told me who Jesus was, so, oh, it's Aslan. And the rest is history. And I'm here with you today.
What a wonderful story. And now we just would love to know how you came to be at Waverley Abbey, and I will hand this to you, and you can keep it then.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And lovely to see you praying for Andy today. We go back a long way, many, many years. So it's lovely to see Andy today. How did I come to be at Waverley? So my wife and I were church planters in our 20s. We planted a church in South London, and were there until just over a year and a quarter ago. Coming out of COVID, we thought we would be there through to retirement. Loved the church and the community and all that we were doing. But then summer before last, we met up with Pete and Sammy Greig. I like to say I knew Pete Greig before he was Pete Greig. I had hair. He wasn't grey-haired. And it was about something else to do with church things. And he said, have you heard what's happening at Waverley? And I sort of heard some rumours of things for 24/7. You know, I went down there. I've been going to Waverley since I was 18 for different things over the years. Beautiful place. And I was wandering around thinking about this vision for Waverley in the future that I'm going to share with you. And I said, Lord, that's the kind of thing worth giving a life to. And then I felt the Lord say, well, will you? I was like, oh, no. Went back, spoke to the boss, my wife, and we started praying and discerning and had an invitation to come and be the new principal of the college and help with the vision for Waverley. And we went through a whole discernment process, as you do, listening to God. It was a very major thing for us to do. In the midst of that, we had some friends who are intercessors. And I get the sense there's a lot of prayers in this room, isn't there? I can feel a spirit of intercession here. Some of you beaver away on your own with the Lord, and he does amazing things. I could just love that here as I'm with you. So we said to them, we're not going to tell you where, when, or what, but would you pray? And they did. One of our friends who gets prophetic dreams, he said, I had a dream last night, and the Lord took me to an old ruined abbey, and I saw you in a monk's outfit with your doctoral cap on, doing spiritual direction and teaching. He said, I don't know if that means anything to you, and a couple of other words. You know, and at the end of the day, those, as amazing as that was, it's very specific. It's been very difficult. As some of you know, when you say yes to the Lord, then there are challenges. Has been challenging. But we said our yes and knew that the Lord had said. I remember in part of that process with all the craziness of how things were coming together, I said, Lord, where are you? He said, you know where I am for you. I've given people far less who've gone to the other side of the world, get moving. So we told our trustees that was a painful time. Telling the church was painful. And moved. So we've been down at Waverley for a year and a quarter. My wife is now the head of people and organisational development, like HR. She does everyone's contracts and reviews and everything. So that's how we ended up at Waverley. So can I share the vision with you? Actually, I think Viv did most of it for me. So what I'm sharing with you is the sort of big vision that I said yes to and my wife to go to. But having been there for a year and a quarter, as we've sought the Lord and prayed, I mean, there's 400 hours of organised prayer at Waverley House now. There's a community of people, someone called Jill Webber, some of you may have heard of. And that's just the organised prayer. I mean, it has been a site of prayer since the 7th century. So steeped in prayer, people praying and reaching for revival. If I said, what's Waverley about? I mean, our world gets crazier and crazier and needs the Lord more and more. And we want an outpouring of the Holy Spirit and people to turn to the Lord. And we feel that we've got something that God's given us to steward and to grow. So Waverley is one of the oldest sites of prayer in the UK. Prayer started there in the 7th century, as best as we can tell. It was the first Cistercian abbey in the UK, built in the 12th century. And it grew very significantly, and it was involved in all the things that abbeys do, looking after the local economy and education and prayer and training, until Henry VIII suppressed it in 1536. People often think that the abbey's fallen down from old age. It's not. It's because local stonemasons were given a license, came along and ripped down most of it. So lots of the Elstead in particular, there's buildings there that are, and Tilford and other places, made from the stones of the abbey. In the 301 years ago, a former Chancellor of the Exchequer, Sir John Aislabie, or Aislabie, I can't pronounce that, built the Manor House, which is at Waverley. And that had, again, a lot of the foundations, and that were taken from the abbey. At some point, English Heritage stepped in and said, enough with the taking what's left. But if you've ever been, there are some beautiful parts left. Often there are film crews who have come over the years to use it for different filming. It's very beautiful. In the First World War and Second World War, it was a military hospital. In fact, it was the first military hospital in the UK in the First World War. People couldn't afford to manage the estates who'd inherited it and gave it to the government. So there are various things down there from the First and the Second World War that people come to see. It became a hotel after the Second World War, then it was derelict. And then Selwyn Hughes, Every Day with Jesus, you're familiar with that? By the way, we have a new app. Did you all know there is a new, there's people nodding, Every Day with Jesus is now digital. We have an app. The vision to buy the place. So the place was bought in 1983, I think, and then several £1 million, put a roof on and redeveloped it. I remember going when I was a new Christian in the late 80s. It was very smart. The idea was it would be a beautiful place for conferencing and events and training, and Every Day with Jesus based from there. The counselling courses began at Waverley not long after that. Selwyn Hughes had been counselling someone pastorally who then took their life. And he thought, we need to do something about this. And so the counselling programmes at Waverley began over 20 years ago, 25 years ago, more than that. And combining, which was controversial at the time and still is for some Christians, understanding of psychology and theology and faith. And here we are now. Waverley has trained at least 750 qualified counsellors, maybe more. No one kept records. I wish we had. And we have a seat at the table nationally advising with our senior tutors on the nature of counselling in the UK. Not just Christian counselling, but counselling. That's the reputation that Waverley has. More recently, chaplaincy training has been taking place at Waverley. We've been training over 200 people as chaplains, most of them often volunteer chaplains. That's been an explosion of something that we know the Lord's doing with us in the last couple of years. And you've heard from Viv that CWR, as it was, joined with 24/7 to become Waverley Abbey Trust, a new charity. We, on our website, you'll see we talk about a new abbey for a new generation, and things like old sparks, new fires. The 112 acres that are left from the estate, that used to be thousands of acres at one time, is going to become a mother house of prayer for 24/7 prayer. A continuing place of encounter. Some of the aspirations are that, and lots of school kids come on trips, that they'll come to the old abbey. They'll be able to put on a virtual reality headset and see what the abbey used to look like, and hear about prayer. And then they'll be able to go down eventually to a chapel, a new chapel that will be built in the future, and see a room with, I don't know, digital screens and people leading prayer from communities all around the world, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and say, there's prayer then, here's prayer now. There already are amazing retreats and things you can do there, but just a little taste of what we imagine in the future. So we have 4 E's. Encountering God is at the center of what we are seeking. Education, that's my role, growing the college, and what we do. Enterprise, we plans to have an enterprise park, things like regenerative farming and maybe 3D printing and other things. Like abbeys were at the center of economic renewal and life. But ultimately, engagement is our other E, that we go out into the world to have an impact so that people can hear about the Lord. So, if I finish with a couple of things, large and still large. I describe you've heard these words probably, perma-crisis, all the permanent crisis that our world is in. And there are many crises within them, crisis of leadership, crisis of education. And there's a mental health crisis underneath an identity crisis. And in particular for the mental health crisis, there are very complex reasons. But very simply, people have there are an enormous number of people who need someone to talk to, have no one to talk to. That's a simple way to put the mental health crisis. The NHS refer, on average, nearly 1.5 million people a year for talking therapies. Most of those people can't access those or have to wait at least 2 years. If you are under 18 years of age, and you may have seen this in the news, I have a special needs daughter and know this situation with her needs through what's called CAMS nationally. Many places now in the UK, if you're a young person, you have to have had 3 viable suicide attempts in order to be seen. And that should shock us. So what can we do about that? Data, NHS data, the best data that's out there shows that the single biggest impact in someone's life with mental health and well-being is a listening intervention, someone to talk to. Lots of people don't need a psychiatrist. They just need someone to talk to. So at Waverley, we train counsellors, chaplains, coaches, mentors, spiritual directors, and leaders, and realise that we're in the listening training business at Waverley Abbey. We train people to be professional listeners. But so we feel that the Lord's also saying that we should be helping the church in the UK become better at listening. I was a pastor for 25, 26 years. And always when some great scheme came to me, it'd be like, well, what can we do? So I imagine and wonder, I've been saying out loud, what if at this moment in history, one day people look back and say, in the midst of that crisis where people had no one to talk to, the church listened. It was the church that listened. Our world is on broadcast, posturing, media, everyone is saying something, but no one's listening, properly listening. So our hope is that the whole church in the UK, literally, when they think about the mental health crisis affecting themselves, people in their church, people in their communities, will think, oh, that Waverley Abbey place, it's got some amazing resources to help me, to help my friends, to help my family. Obviously, Waverley's a wonderful place, but we're pressing into lots of digital courses, digital first things. And there'll be lots of free resources coming online this year for people, like counselling principles for pastoral care. And a variety of things that people will be able to access and use. So we're taking the expertise of our experts and putting it into materials and courses that people can access. So that's something large, and we hope that then people might say, well, if the church helped listen to me, I wonder about this God that listens to them. And that's what we're reaching for, that the Holy Spirit will draw people into openness to listening to God. There's also something very specific we're trying to do with the college in particular. I talked about the shocking situation with mental health in young people. And I've met with senior social workers who are Christians and GPs and people that train GPs and social prescribers, and been sitting around and saying, Lord, how could we help make a difference to that, rather than just being appalled by it? What we think we've identified, and there are already people doing this, by the way, we just want to do it on a larger scale. There is opportunity and sometimes funding to pay for young people to talk to, but there's no one to talk to. So we're like, I think in the church we could find the people for someone to talk to. So one of the ideas is to have a chaplain in every school in the UK. Now, not every school will want one, but many do. There is absolute desperation of having no one to talk to. So we are wanting to find a way to get chaplains into every school in the UK and speak to the church in the UK and say, would you consider training as a chaplain? Or would you identify someone who would? That then gives a relationship with GPs and a chaplain and GPs, and multiplying that through the UK. And then other things like youth workers. It's also very good for youth workers and youth leaders. It's good for their well-being to train as a chaplain, because it gives them resilience and fortitude, but also gives them an opportunity to go into a school. I was talking to someone this week, their school, if they say we've got a street pastor, which churches do well, that's sort of the church's thing, but schools will say our chaplain. There's something that's still there in our culture that we want to reach for with people. And then same with counselling. I said the NHS say there are 200,000 registered counsellors in the UK. Some statistics show, and we have some wonderful counsellors here in the room, some of the numbers I've seen, it probably needs to be twice that, if not 3 times that, to meet the need. So we're speaking to the church and people like you and saying, get the word out. It's a wonderful time to train as a counsellor at the minute. A wonderful, rewarding career as well as an impact. So we hope that you will visit. We have a lovely cafe. It seems to change, new things. My favourite's the Coronation chicken sandwiches. They're the biggest hit. But there are cheese scones, pasties. There's also all those awful healthy things, like bliss bowls, which look far from blissful. But they look very pretty, but I'm told that they're good if you need a vegetarian option. And a lovely cafe, and you can walk over the bridge from the ruins, and that's now open 7 days a week. So I do hope all of you come and have a walk and come and visit our cafe. We have a prayer garden and prayer room, and and the prayer rooms and the prayer spaces can be booked for prayer. People will often say, sometimes there's a thin space. You heard that phrase? You walk into somewhere where people have been praying all day, every day, and the presence of God is just immediately there. It's a lovely place for you to come and encounter the Lord. I hope you will. So if that resonates with you, I hope that when you're thinking, Lord, what could we do? Please pray for us. And I know that I can feel that intercessory spirit here. Pray for what we're doing, because it is immense and very demanding, and we need lots of things to move into place, like donors and giving and training. And please pray for our recruitment. It's not that there isn't a need. We are working very hard this year to recruit a record number of counsellors and chaplains, because firstly, we need that for the mission and the kingdom. But secondly, we need that for the sustainability of the college and where we're at. And maybe some of you might think about training as a counsellor or a chaplain. So thank you. That's Waverley.
Thank you so much. Ever since I heard about the new vision, I've been so excited, and I did want everybody here to hear about it, and I found it even more interesting and exciting than I thought. I'll explain to you afterwards why. But thank you so very much. I think we're going off the live streaming now.